before you head down that road of going gray, because we know it's a long road, or before you continue down that road, there's some things you want to think about. I'm going to walk you through some questions that you're going to want to ask yourself, and I'm going to tell you how you can actually visually see if it's going to look good on you. So yeah, that is today's topic. And I brought you somewhere pretty epic. So let's dive in. Okay, so at the end of this video, I'm going to share some options so that you can determine what gray hair will actually look like on you, some tools so that you can create some actual visuals, realistic ideas of what it will look like on you. But we also need to ask ourselves some questions to make sure that it's going to suit you and your lifestyle. And that would be the first question that I would have for you, which is, will it suit your lifestyle? Legitimately, will you feel comfortable in it? That's the biggest question I think you should ask yourself before any big change, whether it's haircut, whether it's color, regardless. We need to understand, will I feel good in this? And I know that a bit of that is predicated on the idea of whether or not you'll think you look good in it, right? Will it match my skin tone? Will it look pretty on me? All of that stuff. But regardless of that, we still need to think, are you going to feel comfortable wearing gray hair? Let's be straight. A lot of people have this preset disposition in their mind that equates gray hair to being maybe less youthful. I personally don't agree with that, but I'm not going to be the one wearing your hair. You are. Duh. So you need to ask yourself that question, and you need to be honest with yourself. Can we talk about that waterfall right there? Yeah. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's kind of through the trees, but you can kind of see it. It's really sick. And there's like crows all over here. I feel like I'm gonna get pooped on. All right, on to the next question. Okay, so we've actually already been here, but are you looking at that? Come on, like we're not coming back. You're welcome. Okay, anyway, so the next thing you want to pay attention to is, have you noticed that your hair is thinning lately, or even over the past number of years? Many times, depending on how light your gray hair grows in, meaning the amount of your hair that's actually white versus gray, light hair, especially if there's a lot of it, can have a tendency to look thinner. Dark hair just reflects light differently, and it has a tendency to look denser. So if you're feeling like your hair is starting to thin, this may be something that you want to pay attention to in going all gray. Now, there are ways to combat this, and we'll be talking about that at the end of this video, but just so you know, it is something you want to pay attention to. Now, with this, if your hair is feeling like it's a little bit thinner, you may be also noticing a lack of volume. And if that is a concern to you, then you also want to pay attention to whether or not you want to go gray. And the reason for that is because if you're lightening your hair, that can have a tendency to what we call blow out the cuticle. It has a tendency to give your hair a little bit more roughness and feel a little bit fuller, as well as get a little bit more volume. Not necessarily the best for your hair, but you likely have seen a difference if you've been coloring your hair. So moving to all natural hair, you may find that your hair lays flatter. I wouldn't base my decision on that, because realistically, there are many ways to create volume in your hair. And like I said, we will be talking about ways to make your hair look denser, even if you are feeling like it's looking a little bit thinner. So it isn't something that I would stress heavily about, but I would take into consideration these things if you feel like, I never ever want to do any sort of color, I never ever want to do any sort of volumizing process, I don't want layers, I don't want to use product, etc., etc. If you want to be very natural with your color and the process you use to style your hair, then these are things that you want to pay attention to. Okay, now, on to the next step. Okay, the next important question that you have to ask yourself is, how do you plan on going gray? Are you planning on waiting it out for a year and letting it grow out? Are you planning on going to the salon and getting it actually done gray? There are many different ways to achieve this, and I actually have a video that I'll link right here if you want to see my process or the recommendations I would make as to different ways that you can transition to gray hair. But you definitely want to think about how you plan to go about it. Now, the reason that this is really important is not just the obvious, can I wait it out a year or can I get through the transition process, but more importantly, it's about figuring out the plan of attack and figuring out if that plan of attack makes sense for you. Let's say you decide that you want to go for a year and just let it grow out. Fantastic. Are you going to be able to deal with the roots if you've been coloring your hair? If you decide, you know what, I don't want to wait for a year, I want to do it a little bit faster, then I'm going to go in and I'm going to get lowlights and highlights and break up the color and use this to help to mask that grow out stage. Maybe that's a process you want to take. If that's so, great, but do you want to deal with that kind of maintenance in that 6-month period? Is your hair capable of handling, meaning is it in a good enough health to handle that specific process? Maybe you want to go get it done in one day. Now, this is a much more in-depth process. It is much more aggressive. There are absolutely ways to do it, but in that scenario, you want to make sure that you have a stylist or that you know what stylist you're going to go to that can do that. It is a very specific skill set that not everyone is capable of. When clients come into me and ask me to do that, I flat out tell them, I'm not your guy. So make sure you have somebody in mind before you decide to try to go that route. But all of that is to say, understanding the process that you decide to take and understanding if that's going to work for you both financially, for your hair, or just for your mindset, that is very important to understand. And by the way, I've been on every hike in this area, I feel like. I've never been down here, never seen this ball. Okay, I'm gonna hang out here for a second because that's ridiculous. How's that for a view that doesn't suck? That's beautiful. Okay, so you're probably saying, Justin, come on, get to the point. Get to the most important part of this whole video. I get it. And what's the most important part? You want to know, how do you know for sure that it's going to look good? So I got you covered, don't worry. So first of all, white hair and black hair, the two extremes, can have a tendency to make some skin tones look just drawn out. You want to make sure that whatever color you do, regardless if it's gray or blue or green or whatever it is, that it's going to complement your skin tone so that you look vibrant and alive. But here's the best part. When it comes to salt and pepper hair, if you're concerned that it is going to draw your face out a bit, we can always add low lights to it. And when I say low lights, I basically mean adding some of the pepper back into your hair. And that can give an incredible amount of dimension. Now, I've talked about this before in other videos, but it's a great way to create more overall depth and richness in the color. And the best part about that is when you add that depth back in, many times I find that that is enough to bring the life back to your skin tone. So if you're feeling like that is a concern, don't stress too much about it because there are processes that can help with that. But what you want to pay attention to is if you're going to want to take that process on. It isn't a high maintenance, and I'll actually be doing a video about that very soon to walk you through the process of exactly what that looks like. It's a form of color that you put in maybe once or twice a year, and then over time you just kind of see that it's grown out. It's just kind of gone. There's no line of demarcation. You never realize that it's growing out, and it doesn't look like you have roots that need to be retouched when it's done right. So it's a great option even if you are concerned about the maintenance of color. And I realize that talking about doing color seems kind of odd when you're talking about going gray, but it is something that will enhance the richness, but you do want to pay attention to if it makes sense for you. Now, there's a lot of apps online or on your phone that will claim to give you different hairstyles to show you what you would look like in a different hairstyle or a different color, but I find that they typically look very fake. So I don't personally have one of those that I recommend. If you have one, I'd love to hear it. Comment below, let me know. But one option that you could do is go find yourself a cheap wig. This will help to get an idea of how that salt and pepper is going to look on your skin. Be aware that it may be slightly different coloring than your actual natural color, but it is a reference point that gives you a little bit more, in my opinion, of a realistic view than the apps will give you. Now, one other option is actually using Lightroom or a photo editing app where you can take your photo and actually manipulate your hair color to look less saturated in color and essentially give you the idea of what it will look like as salt and pepper. Now I realize this is a little bit more work and it's something that you have to be a little bit more savvy with. So if that is something that you're interested in, for a limited time and a small fee, I would be happy to actually go ahead and do that for you. You email me over a photo and I'd be happy to edit it myself, send it back to you so you could get a better idea of kind of what the gray would look like in your hair. If that's something you're interested in, my email is below. It's hickoxhair@gmail.com. And make sure you put in the subject line, gray hair photo, so that I know. All right, now go ahead and check out this video right here. This is gonna walk you through some mistakes that you wanna make sure that you avoid so that you look the most youthful in that amazing gray hair that you're about to dive into. All right, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Otherwise, take a second, hit that subscribe button, and yeah, we'll see you in the next video.